This video is going to be hard to make, but I think I need to do it for the ones of you that are watching that are Christians and struggling with things and you find it hard to let go of certain things, or maybe perhaps you're new to faith just like myself and you're wondering all of these things that you thought were going to be true that actually weren't true whatsoever. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that in my Christian and faith-led journey, what are the things that I struggle with the most? What are the lessons that I've had to learn? And what are the misconceptions that I thought were going to be true but actually weren't true whatsoever? And it's a big thing for me to share this with you because I really were vocal about what it is that I wanted. For a long time, there was always like, because I spent so much of my life in survival mode, I always knew that I wanted this complete opposite. I wanted my life to do a complete 180. And then I thought that when it came to being a Christian, it was sort of like a sunshine and rainbows. Not in like a literal fairy tale sense, but I just thought that when I was baptized that everything would just sort of like be washed over. It would just be like starting life again from scratch. And all of the pain, I almost thought that like I'd become a new version of me, like I'd start thinking in new ways. I'd almost like forget who I was in my old self, like a literal complete reboot. What I've come to understand is that there are instances of a new life being created. Absolutely, I do think and act in new ways, but not in the way that I was thinking. There hasn't been no harsh reset. Even going back to my baptism, there was no like light bulb moment. There was no like lightning in the sky or anything like that. It really was quite ordinary. But I think in the ordinary and in the day-to-day moments, that's when I've been able to find where the true transformations happened. So I'm going to go into a big one first, and that's going to be forgiveness. As a Christian, I really struggled with this because for a long time I held a lot of resentment. I held a lot of hatred and very much spite and ego. Pretty much anything negative, I held on to it, and I let it form the very character that I was. So in the way that I grew up, foster care, loads of people leaving, just all these different gaps in my personality, I started to try to find these in other people. So I basically lived for other people's validation. When you live for other people's validation, you'll die by their rejection. So the idea here is that I would attach onto these people would leave, and then I'd end up feeling worse than what I felt before they came into my life. And then when it came to certain instances, for example, growing up in foster care and certain people around me in my environment, I held a lot of resentment for them because it was like they were meant to be a certain figure for me and they didn't do that. And I tried so hard to be enough, and it's like I was never enough. And that really sat on my conscience for a long time, and it just boiled and boiled up, and it just started to become my personality. So I was like, right, fine, I'm going to become successful. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to drive nice cars, make loads of money. And I genuinely had this thing in my head one day of like, I was just going to see them one day, and all of a sudden they'd like drop to their knees and they'd be apologising and everything would be okay. And in that moment, my leverage over them was giving them the cold shoulder and saying, nope, you had your chance, you don't get to see me anymore. And that was the thing that was driving me every single morning. I was driven by resentment. I was driven by proving a point to these people. But at the root of it all, it's still just a claim for external validation. So beware of these people where they'll say like, oh, you don't get to eat at my table anymore because you weren't there on the come up or whatever like that. If you actually look underneath the hood, no matter how big the guy is, no matter how much money he's got, it's still just a cry for validation because somewhere along the line, somebody let him down and he's not been able to let go of that. Forgiveness is the key to this. Forgiveness is the one thing that will wash all of that away and create this life of peace that you actually do want to feel. Because when I was trying to prove these people wrong, something always felt like it was missing. I always knew that day would come, and it's like 2 hours later, just like, well, that was pointless. What next? It always leaves you in a position of wanting more. What's next? What's going to come next? So forgiveness is the real big thing here, and I need you to understand this, and you're going to have to go through it. You are going to have to go through it, and it's going to have to be very, very hard. The reason why it was hard for me, because it was everything I'd ever known, right? All I'd ever known was proving people wrong and getting it back in people's face. I was like, you've done me dirty, so I want to do you dirty back. And when you do come to me, when I've made it, and I've done all these things, you're going to know about it, and you're never going to get access to me whatsoever. So for me to lose access to all of that, I almost had to like rebuild myself again. Like I genuinely struggled with this because I was like, well, if I've forgiven these people, now what do I do? And the only way that I can explain it to you guys is when I started to really embody forgiveness, so learning to forgive these people and just having this idea that if I saw them in the street, it'd be cool, shake the hand, whatever. I don't need to spend all my time and confess my undying love for them, but it's just, we're cool. Whatever happened, happened. That's all it is, it? I still want to see them eat, perhaps just not on my table. And what I found was that as I really embodied forgiveness, bearing in mind this is recent, right? We're talking a couple of months, right? So it's only because of Christianity I've been able to learn this. I had like this massive wave of clearing. So imagine your head as a computer disk, right? Or a MacBook or whatever. If you was to open all of your apps open at the same time, your computer would bug out, even if you're doing the simplest action. Because the more apps you have running, it's just going to put a load of pressure on the actual internal processor. It's just going to completely bug out. But then if you close all those apps down, it's going to become faster, more efficient, you're quicker, you're able to get to different tasks a lot more easier. That was the exact same thing on my mind, right? So as soon as I learned to forgive, I had this wave of mental clarity. Emptiness would be the word. And now I was like, well, what do I do with my thoughts now? And then what I was able to do is actually understand what it is that I want and what is actually going to bring me the fulfillment. So God, through forgiveness, has allowed me to think in better ways, create entire new paradigms, perspectives, thoughts that were my actual own. Because again, for the majority of life, I was just like a copy and paste of all these different social characters that I would try to find. Because I was so lost myself, I would just look at different people. I'd be like, I like that, I don't like that. And I'd just attach them onto myself. And I would just build these fake characters that weren't actually me. And there's a lot of truth in that. I do think that we should model ourselves off of people that, we should model ourselves after Jesus, for example. But perhaps if you've got people in your circle, if you've got a gym buddy, for example, you should aim to be as strong as him. But the point that I was trying to make was that was my crutch. That wasn't me as a person. I had no individuality whatsoever. So forgiveness is a big thing. The next thing, and this is equally a big thing, materialism. I have been a very, very materialistic person for honestly as long as I can remember. It started off as a kid when I wanted all of these toys, to in secondary school and I wanted all the GTAs and the Xboxes. And I think a lot of it stems from simply not having it. Because I had nothing, like literally nothing, all I wanted was those things, and I wanted toys and I wanted lots of it. I was a very greedy individual. I was sort of speaking with a good friend, pretty much a brother at this point, with sort of like we was talking about sweet tooths, and I told him a story as to where I think psychologically that came from. It really stems from literally having no food as a kid, and I would climb up on the kitchen table and I would just eat sugar because there was just no food in the house, and I think that was a seed planted psychologically for maybe having the sweet tooth that I have now. So all these different things, really going back, I was a very, very materialistic person. I just wanted things, right? I wanted clothes, I wanted cars. And as I sort of got into my early 20s, these things started to become my purpose, and I brainwashed myself to think that these were my purpose. I thought that having Lambos and Ferraris and cars for every day of the week and suits and money and power and fame, I thought that all of these things were what I wanted. If someone was to say, Josh, what's your purpose? I thought that these were the answers I would give. I was like, I want generational wealth, and I want a car for every day of the week, I want successful business. Such typical stuff. Again, where is the individuality? Where's the purpose? I was just saying whatever I was following online was saying. I was just following whatever it was the people that I was surrounding myself with at the time. And again, these are not necessarily bad things. These goals still stand with me now. I still have a dream car in mind. I still obviously want to grow a successful business, but they aren't in my heart. They aren't my purpose. I'm so much more than that. I was made in God's image. So why on earth am I dumbing myself down to the materialistic? I attributed my entire purpose to a piece of metal. There's no logical upside in that whatsoever. The thing that was driving me out of bed in the morning was proving people wrong and having these things and just being able to just go on Apple Pay a transaction. But again, when I actually went through that emotion and walked myself through it from start to finish, I'd get the car, I'd get the cars, I'd fly on the private jet, and then there'd be a buffer time, and I'd be like, right, well now what? So there was never a finish point. There was never an actual start of happiness type thing. So what God has allowed me to do is actually understand my purpose. And what I've actually become to understand is that I'm not very materialistic at all. I like to have nice things. I care about my character, the way that I see it in terms of physique and dress. I was made in God's image, so showing up is almost like a sign of respect. So that means getting in good shape, dressing well where you can, be comfortable, of course, have nice things. If working hard. The Bible is a big advocate for labour and all that type of stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is these things aren't in my heart anymore. And I know that you watching this, you may not understand that, but for me, it's one of the biggest things that I can just share with you, open up, and just rinse away, because that's not me anymore. I have such a clear focus of what it is I want. So simply put, my purpose is to become an exceptional human being. I want to become someone that God is proud of. I want to potentially become worthy. I'm never going to be worthy, but I just want to make sure that every decision that I'm making is enough. It's right. I've been installed with this centerpiece now. If I can say that is right and that is wrong. So Josh, go do this, but don't do that. And I just want to make sure that I'm doing more of the right things and less of the bad things, because I spent a lot of my life doing the bad things. I carried a lot of regret, carried a lot of shame, and it's stuff that I'm still battling with to this day. I want to be still. I have a bigger appreciation for nature now. I have a bigger appreciation for stillness. I'm a lot better with rest. I went through this period where I don't really have the best relationship with sleep. I'm still in this process of building this vision and this empire, so certain stuff does have to sacrifice, but I'm very aware of the Sabbath day, of rest, of stillness. I absolutely adore fishing. You should see me on Saturday. It was throwing it down. I couldn't go fishing. I sulked like a little child all day. I absolutely adore nature now. I love being outdoors. I like the peace, and I like the way that my mind can think. These things God has given me, but yeah, if you was to ask me a couple of years ago, I'd have just give me my laptop, let me work. I got things to buy. I got Lambos to own. I got money to make and stuff like that. It was so superficial, so fake. And I think a more recent one, and we're going to round the video off here. I think a more recent one is going to be the patience and the ego. And again, I don't want to rehash anything that we've gone over now, but I started to read a lot of books, and these books would give me an ego that I was almost like sometimes better than other people, that I'd done the work and they hadn't, so therefore I somehow out-trumped them, if that makes sense. And I think God has been working with me on the patience, understanding that everyone is having their different battles and people respond to things differently, and sort of like not judging people, having the patience to let them go through what they're going through, let them battle their things and just let God work with them. I will still always try to push people to a higher standard. I think as men, we're definitely in that stage now of we're in sort of like we've got weak men, and that's going to create hard times. These hard times are going to create strong men. So I think that we do have a lot of work to do. A lot of us are lacking purpose, work ethic, and discipline. But the patience that God is working with on is that it's not, it's not a sprint or anything like that. It's a marathon, and we've all got our own different checkpoints, because where I'm judging somebody else that's some next level hedge fund manager and he's super jacked and is on top of the world type thing, he's probably going to look down at me type thing. So it's this scale of there's always going to be a bigger shark than you, there's always going to be a bigger player than you. So it's unjust of me to look down on others because I've done something that they haven't, when there's other people, when there's stuff that I'm actively choosing not to do on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's one thing that I'm right in the trenches of dealing with right now. So it is something I need to work on. I am aware I need to keep pushing it, and God is going to be with me. But yeah, we'll wrap the video up there, and hopefully you enjoyed it.